Oh, well, why don't we get started? Thank you for joining us again for another MentorCore event. We are absolutely thrilled today to have Eric Broughton joining us. My name is Lisa Beth Lentini Walker, and I am one of the co-founders of MentorCore, and we're thrilled to have you here today. And Dan, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
I'm Dan Ayala, also also one of the founders of MentorCore. Welcome, and we're glad to have you, Eric. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me here. Currently, I manage aspects of Optum's compliance program on the operations side. And for those you don't know, Optum is the healthcare technology and services division of United Health Group, sister segment of United Healthcare, largest healthcare company in the world at the moment. So, depending on the day, we're either Fortune 4, 5, or 6. So, from a compliance standpoint, we really have to look at managing everything across the board from a healthcare standpoint, because that's our line of business, but then also as almost its own little city state, having roughly 335,000 employees. So you can imagine that across the globe. We sell products and service in about 140, 150 countries. And then we have core operations in 7 countries. So with that, I'd just like to say again, thanks to MentorCore for having me here. Feel free to hop into the chat box if you have any questions along the way. Be happy to give a quick response to that, or just wait to the end. Either or works. But I think I'd like to first start off by just giving a little bit of a background about my career, in the sense that it's I think what it could be called a non-traditional career. And I think it's important to just set the stage here for how I've gotten to where I am now, by looking at where I've come from, and then also I think how each opportunity really that I've embarked on has given me the skills and the qualifications for the next opportunity. So out of law school, I was again non-traditional at the time, one of the if not only person in my whole graduating class to go right into working at a company. So I went in and supported Medicare compliance at United Healthcare. After about a year and a half, I was approached by my business partners who I was supporting to come over to the business side and help them launch some products that were being regulated by Medicare and Medicaid. I did that for a handful of years, and then the Affordable Care Act hit, and I was asked to be part of a Affordable Care Act team that really looked at what our capabilities were and what the impacts were to our organization. That led to being in the M&A teams, looking at a couple of properties, ultimately closing on one, joining that company after the acquisition on their leadership team. And at that point in my career, I kind of was at a point where, hey, I've been with the company 7 years. What's left, right? Like, what else is out there? And I really just looked at just really kind of unique opportunities. I always liked the health tech space or health services space, and that led me to join a healthcare startup. I was their general counsel interim, but that was just because it was based in Florida, and then I was also launching and productizing their operations. We ended up closing a large deal and merging the company with a larger company. At that point, it just didn't make sense to move to Florida. My wife is licensed in Minnesota, so it
Right.
just wasn't in the cards. At that point, I got asked to return to Optum in a innovation role in the Medicare exchange space, building out the back technology platforms for companies like Walmart, Target, CVS to attempt to sell online insurance capabilities. One thing led to another there, and I got back into the international space and ran product in the UK for a little over 2 years. And over the course of that time, really built out an international background and also credibility, such that when it came time for the company to swap management from the home office with a local office, I was in a position to get tapped on the shoulder to stay on that business line, but from a different role. So I switched into being a regional compliance officer for the UK. in addition to that, I was a compliance officer for our Ireland operations, Puerto Rico, and some of our employee assistance programs that are sold in 140, 150 plus countries. So that kind of backs into where I'm at right now. And I guess I'd just like to make a special call out on the bottom swim lane to looking at alongside what you're doing from a pure career standpoint to how you need to strategically think about how that ties into your personal network and what kind of industry type activities you're doing. So I think it's important, again, just to call out that at each point in my career, I'm having some sort of networking slash industry slash organization that I'm a part of outside of work that's giving me additional skills to really complement what I'm doing in the workplace. And in many cases, giving me contacts, career contacts that are helping me accomplish my goals when I need a specialist on subject XYZ, when I need a component technology vendor for something that we don't have. I know somebody. So it's about getting skills, but also having basically a portfolio of people that you can have on speed dial when you need something.
Right. And
So just
I
real
will
brief.
say that here at MentorCore, we really do care about your network. And I think it's really interesting to hear more about that, and how you identified what organizations made sense for you through these different parts of your career.
Yeah, some of it's trial and error, but I think, you just have to really just think about what organizations are out there and, what am I interested in and where can I get the most, bang for the buck at the point in the career that you're in. When some organizations, for example, require travel, some organizations are going to be fairly niche, some of them are going to be membership based, some of them, are going to be a little bit more exclusive versus inclusive, and just kind of balancing all of that out.
Sure.
But just looking at where I'm at today, I'm in, as I mentioned, the compliance program operations for Optum. So it's a pretty broad department where we're doing a lot of the behind the scenes compliance operations work that supports what you'd call traditional compliance activities. So alongside this, I also am from carryover from my international roles are subject matter expert on sanctions compliance, antitrust, export, and I support our Office of Social Responsibility. And just prior to that, as I mentioned, I was delivering corporate compliance and building out programs in the UK, Ireland, and also Puerto Rico. And I think it's just worth pointing out here that from a experience standpoint and also, a career standpoint, I got this role because I had a reputation of getting things done, knowing that I had the foundational work in compliance right when I came out of law school, but also because I had that reputation of rolling in that I could be somebody that pivoted and do multiple functions within the same company and multiple functions within the same industry. So I think, if you were to ask me, are you qualified to know the ins and outs of the UK Bribery Act or the compliance requirements for delivering healthcare services within a national health service or NHS environment? The answer is no, but I had the trust factor that I could get it done and I could figure out what tools that I needed to do the job and also who I needed to round out my team to ultimately keep the business moving forward. So just kicking off the main part of my presentation today, I think this is really where we're seeing some dynamics change in the work that we do, in the sense that our industries are all becoming technology companies, and that's placing some unique burdens on us as compliance practitioners and compliance professionals, but it's also creating a very, very unique environment where we're able to interact with peers in ways that we perhaps traditionally had not been interacting with them, and also giving us an opportunity to really become cross-functional experts, where we're not always forced to stay in the compliance swim lane, but maybe need to step outside that to complement some of what the skills that our other team members have. Okay, so Right. So just back on track here. This is, I think, when I was talking about we're in a unique position. Here you get it. So we're kind of at the intersection of all these things that are happening. That's being really pushed forward by technology. So looking at what this really means to us and how we can use that intersection of some of the traditionally separate functions within aspects of our profession, and also thinking about things from a business mindset, is the first one, which I've found is critical and the most important, is get things done and help get your business to yes. So it's easy as a practitioner to, say why you can't do something, or say there's this new law that passed that means that we have to do X, Y, Z, and you're going to bear this cost. But in the, I think, other aspect of looking at this from a business standpoint, why not think about, like the example I said, if a new law passes that you have to comply with, why not position it to the business as an opportunity to have additional credibility in the marketplace? If you have to comply with a law, why not put some marketing spin on it? Say, here's our stamp of approval. We actually comply with it. So, it's just being able to think about ways that if you had this hit your pocketbook, how would you better stomach having to deal with the change, and how can you as a compliance professional help get your business to yes when that's what they ultimately want to do? The other one here, I think, that's important here is work hard, show your work. This is something that I think is becoming increasingly challenging just from a timing standpoint, and having a business environment that's fast-paced. But the best way to do this is to get in front of the leadership teams, get in front of your business partners, show them some data, build out some dashboards, put together some metrics that show, for example, the training rates of them and their peer groups, or the delivery rate of how many times you're getting audited by an external party, and really just let them know from a metric standpoint what you're doing and what value you're doing, because oftentimes that's overlooked unless you're proactive about it. And like I said, produce a simple dashboard, or even quarterly report in the compliance committees, or some way just to really just I think sound your own horn in many ways. The other one here that I think just real important, and I'm not going to go through the whole list here, I just want to hit the top ones that I think are oftentimes overlooked, is be headline focused. So as compliance practitioners, we love to go into detail about, the history of the compliance program, why things are changing, industry trends from just a regulator standpoint, maybe some of the underlying laws that are changing, putting pressure on the business that are forcing us to look at this, and ultimately, hey, this is the impact to our business. But the business teams, they don't really care about all that background. What they want to know is, okay, what do I have to do, and what is it going to cost me? And I think that, when you really make that transition to being able to say something at a very executive level, headline level, you're better able to communicate with your business partners, but also you're starting to learn how to speak their language. They're trusting you as a professional to know all the background that leads up to what the headline is, and that's really where you get things done.
Eric, have you found
The other
in this move toward more business-enabled features that have historically been back office, compliance, security, risk, have you seen the business areas trying or starting to see them as business enablers versus just cost centers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly as you get more into heavily regulated industries, the fact of the matter is if you're out of compliance, you're either losing customer contracts, you're getting fined or penalized, or you're not even getting invited to bid on new business. So in that sense, you really are an enablement, or I should say in some ways, almost like a, protection, detection, sales support function.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's what I'm seeing anyways.
Okay, thanks.
I think just the last one I'd like to cover off on here is learning how to staff. And this is, I think, one that is critical and can in many ways make or break you in your career, in the sense of not just knowing how to, I'll say, up manage and down manage within your compliance team, which is its own challenge, right? But also learning how to up manage and down manage within your non-compliance team or with your business partner team. And what that means is, if you've got a message that needs to be delivered that's not good to your top sales executive, you better have some sort of a relationship or better have some sort of way that that executive already knows who you are and already understands a little bit of your reputation. Whereas if it's just, some sort of minor impact to a downstream operation where a widget switch has to be switched up when it used to be down, maybe, it's easy to reach out to somebody on a manager level and, set up a 30-minute meeting and walk them through. Whereas at the executive level, again, you better walk in there and know your stuff, because they're going to have tough questions about who, what, where, why, and when that the somebody in a different role, more mid-level management may not have and may not need to justify in order to accomplish what you need to have them to do. So with that, I'm going to switch to the next slide here. And just jump into what I see happening within these high-tech environments is that today's compliance really does favor a multidisciplinary team. So you've got here
I
the
love this, by
compliance
the
guy,
way. This is terrific.
Batman in the Batman in the middle. But you also see you've got privacy, IT security, legal at the table, and you've got human resources. And in many cases, especially in international environments, your tax and accounting teams are relying on user compliance professionals as well, because where they might know, the tax code, they might not know how to do a tax risk assessment. And those are I'll say, the cross-functional tools and the teamwork that you can come together when you collaborate and share some of those functional knowledge of wisdom and use that cross-functionally. I think the other benefit of working with your broader governance team in a way like this is that you are really able to prevent, I'll say, at a business level, parent shopping. So oftentimes business sees the governance team as one, whereas somebody thinks, privacy is the same as security, same as compliance, same as legal, taxes the same as accounting. So if I ask one person and they give me an answer that I don't like, I'm going to go ask somebody else and see if I can get a different answer. So by staying connected with your larger team, you're able to prevent that and also provide better, more uniform advice that cuts across, in many cases, a question that's going to have several levels of subject matter expertise requirement. And then one other thing here that I think is again very critical to understand in today's compliance world as a compliance professional is to know how your business operates. And what I've got on the screen is a little bit busy here, but what it's really saying is that in a lot of teams, you're having to do not just traditional corporate compliance support along the 7 elements, but you're being brought in. And if you're not being brought in, you should be begging to be brought in to the front line of product delivery, the front line of product development. Because what's happening in these high-tech environments, and this is cutting across industries, is that teams that are brought in late for governance. So if you as a compliance professional are just flying in once a quarter to do or to participate in an annual compliance review of a particular product line, you may find out that you should have been involved 2 months ago because there was something in terms of compliance that came up that should have been built into the product. And the product team or the business team is going to hate your guts, because then they're going to have to go back and rework in order to be in compliant, in order to, as Dan said, be that enablement function. So really the point of the slide is really finding a way to know what your business is and know how to not disrupt what the process is that they're doing, but find a way to slot in. So in this instance, it could be as simple as meeting with the program manager or the product manager, set up a monthly one-on-one for 15 minutes just to get an understanding of what's going on, have them show you, from a business standpoint, what's the strategy. And this would be in addition to any sort of compliance committee meeting where you'd see that overall business strategy. And perhaps, when you're seeing a quarterly business review with the executive team, this is getting more into the weeds of the team that's ultimately building and moving forward the heart and soul of what your company is doing. Similarly, I think it's also important to think about that approach with your functional stakeholders and SME teams. Just by way of example, when I was supporting the UK, Ireland, and Puerto Rico, what we found was very, very useful was within our functional stakeholder team. So legal, contracting, IT security, privacy, compliance, and from time to time SMEs, depending on agenda items, is we would have a standing 30-minute call every other week. As I mentioned, that prevents the parent shopping, but it also allows you to share what's happening within your various swim lanes so that that can influence the approach that others may have in their own subject matter swim lanes. And at a high level, that was just a little bit on my background, and I think really thinking about how you as a compliance professional can take a look at using some of these methodologies that support technology and using some of these business-focused, business mindset mentalities to really influence how you as a compliance professional progress in your career, but also how you can help your department progress and really hit those milestones.
So Eric, the superheroes around the console, have you given any thought?
You're just infatuated with Superman, aren't you?
Well, I'm a security person. I'm security and privacy, so I'm Batman and Robin. But the idea of this cohort being so close, it's one of the things that started this whole discussion around MentorCore in the beginning, was that there was this really great overlap and really great adjacency, and in some cases overlap and mutually beneficial items. And as you talk about your career path, thoughts on migration out of compliance into the security and privacy side, or vice versa, with the obvious one big barrier of most security and privacy professionals are not necessarily attorneys as well. But I guess tell me a little bit about your thinking on migration back and forth, and how that plays into career growth, if you've ever considered it, and what people should need to consider if they're looking to come from maybe the security and privacy side into the compliance and legal side.
And I would just ask if you think that it's a little more permeable now than it was before.
Yeah. That was like 97 questions all in one.
I'll try to remember them all, I guess. And I think the quick answer is yes. And I'll say that just from my own experience, I've been able to go in and out of different functions, as I mentioned, based on past experience, but also past reputation and just that you're able to get things done, right? So even if, like I said, in the UK example, even though I didn't know UK compliance regulations, I had a reputation that I would find out a way to figure them out and make the business come out ahead, right? So that's, I guess, my own personal example. I would say coincidentally, within, I'll say, my peer group of compliance professionals, I've had one networking contact switch from corporate compliance into human resources within the last month. I've had one individual switch from privacy into compliance within the last month. I've had another individual switch from M&A compliance into M&A P&L accountability. So, business owner. So it does happen. And I think that is, in my mind, just a testament to compliance professionals being seen as individuals that can have a business mindset and can take the skills and the know-how from running, in this case, a compliance program operation that has, a very large accountability, but also a P&L and staffing model that needs to deliver against the business requirements. So, those are skills that you learn in a compliance department that, from a leadership standpoint or management standpoint, even apply unilaterally across the board.
Yeah, and you have to be way more than I'm sorry you can't do that mindset in order to be seen that way. And I like that all of our flight fields are moving that way, or continuing moving that way.
So, we've had a lot of disruption in general. How do you believe that the pandemic and COVID has changed the way that people are behaving in compliance, in ethics, and privacy, all of the areas that you've potentially covered? Do you see any changes in behaviors and expectations?
Uh, Short answer, yes. Just a couple examples, I'll say. Um, Compliance professionals, as I've mentioned, are, I think, continually getting pressured to adapt and be that sort of hub and spoke for the multidisciplinary team that you see here. So, it wasn't by chance that I put compliance in the middle here with Batman. Reason being is because within a compliance department, you've got core elements of business operations, which I'm currently in. You've got the true subject matter expertise. So those would be to be corporate individuals that are delivering 7 elements. You're going to have business line compliance leads that are operating within, a very narrow window of what their compliance function is. And then you're going to have within that some of the supporting functions, whether that be project management, whether that be, data analytics or compliance analysts. So you've got the workings of a team that can be, I'll say, airlifted out and put into a situation and have all the tools needed to survive. And for what it's worth, that happened to our team. And I know several other industries where when COVID hit, especially in the financial services banking industry and especially in healthcare, where compliance teams were expected to take a lead and, one, figure out what was going on, but really lead that cross-functional team through change and dynamics that have never been seen. Just by way of example, I think, on the banking side, with all the PPP loans that were coming out, the regulators were changing the rules as they're going along. So compliance had to be ahead of that so that they could get legal sign off on, the loan documents, so they could get the salespeople trained on what was acceptable for the application, so on and so forth. Similar in the healthcare side of things, we saw change hitting at, again, a pace that was never seen. So we were having, at the height, upwards of 50 to 60 laws and regulations change per day as it related to a lot of the CMS waivers or governor executive orders, and so on and so forth, such that, how do you operationalize that? So you've got the compliance team out front basically fielding all of the change, analyzing, and then getting sign off from the governance team. So, privacy, legal, and then ultimately compliance working with the operation so that they know which widgets they need to switch up and down and which radio buttons need to be pushed within the operations to still be in compliance with a law that might change back next week. So, yes.
So,
So yes.
So one of the things you talked
Did I
about
hit,
that
did I
totally
hit all
answered.
7 questions?
I think so. But one of the things you talked about was how, when you're dealing with business leaders. You don't want to just walk in and always deliver bad news, or, never have had an interaction and not have your reputation precede you. When you talk about reputation, how do you kind of get your reputation, maintain your reputation? What is it that you do that helps you to be successful in your role? And are there things that people who are new to the profession or who want to transfer into the profession should think about?
Yeah, so I think this is where it's a balancing act, and what I mean by that is you build your reputation by getting things done, right? So if you say you're going to do something, you get it done, and you deliver, and the business sees that. The other thing to keep in mind is, as a compliance professional, many of us are perfectionists, and we often
What?
don't don't want to don't want to be in a position to make a judgment call when we're not 100% certain that what advice we give is going to be accurate to 100% degree. But from a business standpoint, you look at business leaders, they're working with market dynamics, industry dynamics, um, economic and financial dynamics that are always in a gray area. So directionally, at any time, business leaders can probably say, yeah, 70 to 80%, I know what's going to happen. And they're just, willing to take that risk with that swing factor. Then you see something like COVID come up, and nobody saw that coming.
Mhm.
So, you have to be able to be nimble and dynamic as a compliance professional, and also be, I think, really comfortable with when you're working with business executives, they're expecting you to think like they do, in the sense of give them advice and put it within a window of certainty. So, they're more willing to accept a 80% degree of accuracy and get a answer within 2 hours. And I'm going back to the COVID example, hey, we need to know this by end of day. Okay, great. This has never happened before. We don't know what regulators are going to think. It's not acceptable to not have a answer at the end of the day. Your
Mhm.
business partner wants to know with a degree of certainty, what do you think at this snapshot in time?
Great.
Yeah, that's a variation. You answered part of the question that I was going to ask was around the binary nature of compliance versus some of the other partners you work with, which are more risk based. Whereas that there's that gray, or there's no such thing as perfect security. There's no such thing as perfect privacy. But in compliance, I guess tell a little bit how you balance that innate desire over here to let's live on a scale somewhere from 0 to 1 versus compliance, which my impressions are that it's far more binary.
I would totally disagree with it. I think that compliance is all risk-based, right? And you need to understand risk tolerances. But what do you think, Eric?
Um, I'm going to say it depends.
That's my
So
Because
answer.
yes,
you're
I
a
think
lawyer.
I think some things are very binary, right? Like, so here's an example.
Legal,
The
illegal.
UK has a law. Yeah. The UK has a law that you have to post on your company website your anti-trafficking
Yeah.
policy. Okay,
Yep.
so that's easy, right? If you don't post something like that, you're out of compliance. Um, by the same token, when these regulations were coming out of the UK about posting anti-human trafficking policies or yearly activity on your company website, this was never required before. So nobody knew to what degree you had to go into detail about your program, metrics, activity, industry risk, um, so on and so forth. So in that sense, you had to put the two together, and you had to put something up, but it was a fine line and a judgment call about what you actually communicated publicly. If
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it does. Thanks. That's helpful, especially for those of us not in compliance or not rigorously. Well,
Well, but
even when
hey,
you're
Dan,
looking
everybody's in compliance. Compliance is everybody's responsibility, just like security is everybody's responsibility.
exactly. Good.
Um,
Thanks.
Question for you. You talked about these different organizations that you had become a part of and how some of them are more exclusive or more inclusive and, kind of different purposes that they might serve. Tell me a little bit more about what you look at, what you look for, ways that organizations have helped you on your journey, whether it's through networking connections, education, et cetera. I'd love to hear your take on it and what people should think about as they're thinking about, where they spend their time and energy.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll say is ask people that are in the profession that you want to be in what organizations are important to be involved in, and that gives you a short list. I think the other things is looking at what are you interested in and where can you look to get support from perhaps individuals in a same industry or similar industry, but outside of your company or outside of your current network. And I'll just scroll up and just give an example here. So when I started getting into the international space, I knew that I needed to develop an international network more so than when I was back at this point in my career. Back at this point in my career, I was just really just interested in, continuing, I'll say, some of my college studies of languages. So being a board member on two local Minneapolis and St. Paul based
Yeah.
um, cultural groups. Whereas when I came to this point in my career, I realized I got to join, for example, this organization here, Young Excellence in Healthcare. It's a under 40 application based group out of continental Europe
Mhm.
for individuals in the healthcare vertical. And through this organization, I did apply twice. So that's the other thing is if you don't get to be a part of an organization once, that just means maybe they were full that year, or you just came up at a bad time in their application queue. So don't ever take that as something that means that you can't be a part of an organization. But I just bring that up because it's in this organization that I met several other individuals that led to me really just being in a position to speak at industry events in Europe
Yep.
this is on the business side, but then also through that, some of these sponsors at these events, of course, were compliance and law firms that when I switched back into a compliance role in the international space, I then had those contacts for when, for example, we were trying to figure out if our software was a medical device under EU or UK laws. I had somebody that I could call, like I said, have the I guess we should call it the bat phone in this case, given the slide that was shown, but have
Now
that
I
bat
want a
phone
bat
that you can
phone
just
for the
pick up.
holidays.
Yeah, and just be able to call somebody and ask, hey, this is what we're looking at. What do you think? Or do you have somebody that you can refer me to? So I think in that way, it's just looking at kind of where do you want to go and what organizations are out there that will support your network, and I think also support the value that you can bring back to your company.
That's great advice. I
Really good
think,
insight.
one of the other things that I've seen a lot with people is that they join organizations, but then they don't bother to attend anything, or maybe they only sometimes read the newsletter, and that doesn't usually work that well because it seems like you get out of an organization what you put in, right? Um,
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, for that reason, it's important not to overstretch yourself. So, from a personal slash networking slash professional standpoint, I like to be involved in organizations, and that means really that I have to pick, I'd say one, two, or three organizations tops. You're not going to
right.
be fully engaged in five organizations at a time, and it's okay to limit it to one, limit it to two, but really make your focus be on those high impact groups that you can, like I said, use to build out your personal network and your personal brand, but also groups that can help you find ways to add value career wise and professional wise back to your company.
So, on the topic of board memberships, because you talked really briefly about being on a board, and you were on two cultural boards in the Twin Cities. What a lot of our members are really interested in board service, board membership, not just nonprofit, because everybody at some point probably wants to get paid to be on a board, but what is your philosophy when it comes to that? Um, I know you said that, at least with the young professionals, you applied to be part of that, and that was a member organization, but what'd you do in terms of your board work? How'd you find out about those positions? What path did you take with them? And like, is there an ending point for that, or is that something that just goes on for forever?
I think some of it is trial and error. So, what I didn't list on the other slide was the groups of organizations where, I attended events, met people, and I'm not going to say, check them off as something I didn't want to be involved with, at all. But I could tell from just my sense that, hey, this is an organization that, it's great for other people, but I need to look somewhere else. So, just knowing that it's okay to try out different organizations, and if you don't um, have the ability to attend further events, that's okay. People, come in and out of these organizations all the time. But I think what's important is if you do find that there's an organization that you are interested in, that you do find has a good group of people in leadership roles or has a good group of people that attend events, you should keep going. And if you're so interested, and interested in the sense of being on the board or taking on a committee chair role or being in any number of group leadership roles, the best thing to do is to attend, volunteer. I'll say this, volunteer for something that nobody wants to do or is
Right?
outside of somebody else's wheelhouse. So, come up, like, here's a couple examples of things that I've done. One group, their board didn't necessarily know how to use social media. So I developed a one-page how-to social media guide so that they could use that personally when they're promoting things that the organization was doing. The other example is, things that, nobody wants to do, plan a holiday party or plan an event. Those things come down to just project management basically, or vendor management, which it's not rocket science, but it just means keeping things on task. But oftentimes people just don't like doing that. And when you do those things, you get recognized, and in many cases, you just may get invited to be on a board. You may get invited, hey, we've got our elections coming up. We've got two people rolling off. We think you'd be great on the board. Are you interested? So I guess, these organizations oftentimes pre-shop and pre-sell applicants for the leadership positions, and that's a great way to get involved.
That's good. Have you noticed that how have you had to change your interactions either with boards or with networking groups now that we can't physically be together to do it? Has it changed how you approach interacting with people or your involvement or the time that it takes to build relationships in these groups?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's hard, right? For somebody that's built a professional career around interacting with people. I mean,
Mhm.
Lisa Beth and I had coffee. What was that, in February
It was
this year?
before it seems like a million
Yeah,
years ago. It was not too long ago. I think it was February, and it just seems like it was a different era.
yeah. So I mean, I think in some cases, it's doubling down on the connections that you had when in person was available.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I guess you know what I mean by that is schedule like if you had your sort of rotational group of people at work, or within the industry, within the community that you'd have a coffee with, half hour coffee, just do it online. Double down on those connections that you have. But I think also being open to the way that some of these new platforms have breakout rooms and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's tough, right? Coming from somebody that hated it at first, like outright hated it. Now I think it just comes down to it's either that or nothing. And I think a
You
lot of people
succumbed to
are,
it.
yeah, a lot of people are hungry, right, for that connection, and knowing that when you double down on the connections you have, that's great. But then complementing with that, with going to an event that maybe is going to have a breakout room, and you know what, you might have to be a little bit vulnerable. Somebody might have to see your living room, or somebody might have to hear the dog bark in the background. But guess what? That's what happened with everybody. So get over it. So that's kind of my philosophy on it.
Yeah, I think it's actually strengthened relationships because people are able to see each other as people and not just colleagues, not just workers or as contacts, but rather the whole human being. It can be uncomfortable. It can be, there's difficulties that go along with it. But I know I've been able to build closer relationships with people as a result of it. Uh, at a broad scale because of you get to meet the cat, you get to meet the kids, and you get to just get to know them as a whole person, almost in the way that we used to be able to do when we'd go. I traveled a lot overseas. You'd go to a place for the first time, and you'd spend the office would be fine, but then you'd all go out to dinner afterward, and you'd get to know the people as people, and that's where the relationships really happen. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of in these interactions, where you can see the world that we all live in.
Right. And it's interesting. One of the other things that's been happening that we've seen at MentorCore and in a lot of other places is, after events, people are reaching out and saying, "Hey, I listened to what you said, and I have some questions for you that maybe you didn't address during the event." And so I've seen people being, I think, a little bolder in terms of building relationships after they see somebody like I ended up, you know, meeting a person from the Caribbean who I probably would not have reached out to, but for the fact that I listened to this webinar and I was like, hey, really good job. Good job. I really liked your presentation and I'd love to stay in contact. And, it's amazing how those things happen. So, another question for you. Um, we had Jenny O'Brien on as a guest, and a number of members asked about, how do you get into a regulated space like healthcare um, if you haven't been in it before? And whether it's healthcare or financial services, that's one of the questions that I've seen a lot from a lot of our members saying, hey, how do you break into some of the highly regulated spaces, and what talents and skills would people be willing to look at if you don't have experience in the industry?
Yeah, overcoming the lack of line item on a job description.
So what did Jenny say?
Well, she said that she looks at people's skills, and like, just because you haven't been in compliance before doesn't mean that you can't be in compliance if you're bringing in some interesting skills. And similarly, some organizations take more of a look at like, what can you bring to the organization, and diversity counts.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I guess I'm probably a good example of that. So somebody that took arguably 10 years off in a compliance professional role and then coming back into one. So I think people do understand the value of a diverse background. It allows you, I think, to walk in somebody else's shoes, especially when you had some business experience. But I think, to my earlier point, I was hired in the UK not knowing any UK compliance at all, which proves that if you know how to navigate compliance, there's enough similarities between industries, um, and especially at the corporate compliance levels, that if you've done it somewhere else, you probably can do it somewhere, I would say, that you want to go next. You just have to be able to craft that story about why the industry that you're in has given you skills that are applicable to this different industry. And I just think also, um, from just a hiring standpoint, a lot of us I think are in hiring roles too, as as a hire somebody that's a manager, being willing to look at those candidates that maybe a recruiter or HR would have already typically screened out. So I think it
Mhm.
goes both ways.
Or the automated candidate system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I typically ask for all the applicants in those cases because I've found some of my best hires in things that have been weeded out by the automated systems.
And I would echo that 100% because especially in, for whatever reason, especially in compliance, privacy, IT security, legal, automated systems, and a lot of times, HR doesn't understand what they're reading, to find those really great candidates based on just a blank read of a resume. So, um, we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to make sure we get our signature question in. So, what is the best advice that you have ever received from a mentor, Eric?
Um, that is a tough question. I think I've got probably two answers. The
Pull 'em
first
out.
one was I guess, as I mentioned, I came out of law school, um, and took a non-traditional path, starting right with a company. And I had a mentor at that time that said, "Go where the rest of the pack isn't going, and don't be afraid." So I think that really led me to have confidence in myself to be doing something that others looked at and at the time didn't understand. And I think the other bit of advice that I think is critical, especially in a time like this, is to be resilient, and being able to just be comfortable with change and focus on really what you as an individual can manage, and don't focus on things that are outside of your control.
Great.
Those are great advice. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing those. That's good. I like go where the rest of the pack isn't.
That one's going to make for a beautiful social graphic, just FYI. I think that's going to be a beauty of a one.
Lisa Beth has that you're about to be quoted gleaming her eye.
Great. Well, I don't see any questions right now other than what we've already asked you. So I want to thank you for your time and really appreciate all of the perspectives that you've brought. You've had an amazing career so far. It'll be fantastic to watch as you continue on your career journey. And we're just so thankful that you were willing to share it with us at MentorCore today and with our members. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. And if anybody on the line has any follow-up questions, my contact details are there.
Excellent. Thank you for being here, Eric. Really appreciate it. It was nice to meet you, and we'll hope to see you again on another for another MentorCore event. This was great.
The next happy hour, okay?
Yeah,
Sounds
that's
good.
right. Well, thanks
All
for
right,
joining.
thanks everybody.